Good morning, Chris. Welcome to another wonderful day in January where the entire world is freezing over. How are you?
Yeah, really?
Yeah.
I didn't realize it was. It's not
So,
freezing here.
well, aren't you fancy? So, Chris, today we are talking about deep dives, how we do deep dives, what is a deep dive, how deep are dives, and how do you dive into the deep?
Great. Sounds like you're on it. Continue.
Yeah, I'm very excited. Before we get started, I did want to give a special shout out to itch.io is doing a bundle called Solo But Not Alone 4, which allows you for $10, you get over 100 solo RPGs and you get to support Take This, a mental health nonprofit, the oldest gaming kind of focused mental health nonprofit, and is all about destigmatizing mental health and overcoming challenges within the mental health sphere. So with your $10, you're helping support a great cause. And also, you get 100 solo RPGs, which are role playing games that you play with yourself, hence the Solo But Not Alone.
I'll leave
You
that
can
one
get
alone.
all. There's a lot of, like, if you've never played solo RPG, I think the one that I just blanked on what it's called. Basically, kind of like a Nordic fantasy one. I can't remember what it's called, but there's so many solo RPGs in here. Like one of them is Pounce, where you get to play as a kitten and you're going questing for your person because you're lost, and that's kind of adorable. There was another one I was very confused at because the name just grabbed me, where you are playing as a wizard, and it's called Shadow Wizard Money Gang, and you win the game, and you get to call yourself Shadow Wizard Money Grandmaster of the Shadow Wizard Money Gang. And that's kind of, I would love to fit that into a business card.
Which one are you gonna play? What looks like your favorite game?
Which one looks like my favorite game? I don't know. Pounce looks really cute. I don't play very many solo games, just because I have board games that I can play solo by myself.
You do
And
have board games.
yeah, so of those, I've probably played Scythe and Gloomhaven the most as a solo experience.
Yeah, okay. I can see that. Well, that sounds great. I mean, we talked about that last week. So, mental health is important. There's some jokes in there for us old people to say, but they're not really appropriate. So, and they're not really jokes because you know what, mental health is really important. Or you end up
There
like
you go. Way to get old, I guess, and learn, become wise. So,
Yeah, no.
Chris, back to our regularly scheduled programming, we were going to talk about deep dives and our deep dives and how we deep dive into the deep dives. Deep dive.
Yes, we were. So, how long have you been doing the deep dives now, Stephen?
Let's see. We started the blog, was it 6 years ago?
Approximately, yeah.
Yeah. So 5.5 years, 5 3/4 of a year. I don't know. 6 years, somewhere around there.
Well, we
We've been
didn't
doing a
really
lot of
start
them.
off with it right away. Yeah, how many have we done? Let me see. Don't tell me.
120 something.
Yeah, that's about right. We've done a lot. I can't believe I counted them all, but
126
right
deep dives, and our next one's supposed to come out the end of this week. So
then.
120.
Why wouldn't it? Why wouldn't it come out the end of this week?
I'm very busy, Chris. I don't have to answer your accusations. So 126 deep dives, and our first one at the very, very beginning of it all was the fireball. Do you remember the
It
fireball,
was.
Chris?
Yeah, I wrote it.
Yeah. I also helped. I was there. I went back and did stuff. But yeah, I mean, you wrote it because you were like, how interesting can the fireball spell be? How much? I mean, arguably the most iconic spell in this game, even surpassing like Wish or I'm trying to think of like another super iconic spell that.
Magic missile.
Yeah. Magic missile, to probably equally iconic. But yeah,
Yeah.
fireball is.
You know what spell I feel bad for? On a side note, lightning bolt. Fireball and lightning bolt came out at the same time. They're both third level spells. I mean, it's probably a 95-5 ratio that people take fireball or lightning bolt. Anyways,
Well, that's because line effects are kind of the worst,
they
and
suck.
big blob of fire is the best. And also, fire, I think, as an element,
Explodes.
everyone's like, I want to make a pyromancer. No one ever talks about wanting to make a electromancer.
Yeah, I guess so. That sounds about right.
I might be
Anyways, I
the one that
digress.
remembers Static Shock fondly from the late 90s, early 2000s, which was a
Yes.
TV show about a kid with electric powers.
Well, Spider-Man had Electro as one of his enemies, but that's about as far as I can remember.
No.
All right, so yeah, the fireball. Yeah, I don't know why I thought it was interesting, but it was. I mean, it was kind of neat. Go through the additions and look at it. I mean,
Yeah, mostly
it
watch
has,
the damage dice increase.
yeah, it has changed. It definitely has changed. Early editions, I think, like if you were by the fireball, like it melted all of your stuff, like literally on and off your body. So you cast
Things would catch
a
fire.
fireball in your dragon horde, all the gold was melted. It kind of sucks. Forgetting having any scrolls that was in the horde. So, that got changed.
And forget casting it into a small room because it was volumetric, not a radius, a set radius. And so it's like it fills up this volume of space. And it's like, well, the room's not that big. Well, I guess you're in the hallway and you're getting hit.
Yep. So that was fun too. That's back when, people
I
hated
can't imagine
players.
like a bunch of kids sitting around a table and being like, all right, it does 800 cubic feet. So let me do some quick math real quick, figure out the cubic volume of this room. All right, so it's going to blast up in the hallway. Let me check. How big is this hallway?
You're all dead.
Yeah,
No,
I could imagine many game masters just like, blast back. No, I don't care how far back you're at. It hits you. No, the room's too small.
You're going to die. Yeah, so, I mean, that was the first one that set off the avalanche of writing we had to do. Surprisingly, we didn't hit the doing a lot of monsters till I want to say like the fifth one, because then we did the wish spell, the second in the list of iconic spells. And then for some strange reason, we did the barbarian class. I bet you that was your suggestion.
Why we did I don't remember that far back. My memories, I barely remember yesterday. We did the barbarian class, which was, I think, the first time you told me, I hate reading, I hate you, I want to quit Dumpstat. Because you had to read, like we both had to read like a 90-page barbarian handbook in second edition, which was all about barbarian with like 15 different, like, not subclasses, because they're not subclasses at that point. They were like class archetypes, kind of, where it's like you kind of rethemed a couple of things about the barbarian and maybe a couple of different tiny mechanics changed.
And then had the epic feats and all the different it was horrible.
And we've done a couple of classes.
Were you reading the Conan series for one of your articles at that point? I don't think you were.
No, I didn't know anything about Conan until this past year when I was doing my Reading Appendix N series that died out because I couldn't get a hold of books, and I just kind of gave up on trying to find these old books because they weren't available digitally. And I didn't feel like spending $60 for a hardback book.
Yeah, no, that's especially one that's not the best written book in the world, probably.
Oh. Yeah, I have opinions about a lot of those books.
Yeah. Was it the books or the author, or both? So after Barbarian class was Cursed Items, which I really liked. But then we went, and the first monster we did was You're the favorite creature in the entire world in the D&D universe, the kobold.
That's everyone's favorite creature, Chris.
Sure.
So that was our fourth one, was the kobold, which is to this day, I'm not going to say that that was our best deep dive, but it did kind of get us started and kind of got us going through all of it. It was kind of, I think at that point, very, very interesting. What kind of like how kobolds started, because I didn't really have a reference at that point for the old edition of kobolds, because they were like these weird little rat creatures and not quite the adorable dragons that we all know them to be. They were more like troll goblinoids than kobolds, which maybe historically in our world that's true.
Could be. Yeah, they were rat creatures, basically.
Yeah.
Instead of annoying little, I want to be a dragon, but I'm never going to be a dragon creatures. Yep.
Yeah, it wasn't really until 3E when the dragon look stuck and then just stayed there and never left. And we're better people for it.
Oh, we're going to be doing one of these all about the kobolds soon, aren't we?
We should, you know what, change our plans. Let's just spend an hour talking about all the great things about kobolds and how amazing kobolds are.
So after the kobold, I think that really was what set us off doing. It's snowing out here. Great.
It was the mimic after the kobold.
Yes. And yeah, we I forgot about that one. That was another. We did a lot of the iconic monsters first, and we'll get into where we're going now in a little bit.
The one iconic monster we haven't done yet is the dragon, specifically the red dragon.
I left that off the notes. If you didn't notice specifically.
One day we're going to have to do the red dragon, Chris. Maybe that's the last one we do, because you'll die of like an aneurysm. But we eventually have to do the dragon part of Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It probably won't be as bad as we think, because what I've noticed with a lot of these monsters, especially the iconic ones, is they don't change them because they're so, they don't want to change the history because they're so iconic. Yeah, I just didn't feel like using the word over and over again. It's some of the other monsters that you're like, I didn't even know that existed, that they kind of change throughout the editions to try and be like, no, this is really cool. Now it does this. So it's been interesting to see what they've done with some of the monsters. You go through the editions. First edition usually is like, okay, everything is here to kill you. I don't think we've run across a single monster in the first edition. I have written it many times, and you usually take it out where it's just like the monsters that are in the Fiend Folio, 100% are there to kill you. There's a reason the name of the book is Fiend Folio. No fiend is going to be nice. So every monster in that book, I think, wants to kill you.
I don't think the Kinku. I think the Kinku showed up in that book, and
they still
doesn't want to kill you. Oh wait, no, the Kinku does. I was thinking the Aarakocra. I don't remember where the Aarakocra first shows up. The Aarakocra don't want to kill you, but they will kill you if you mess with them.
At best, they don't actively try and kill you. So second edition was fascinating because second edition takes the monster, for the most of the time, doesn't change it too much, but adds to it. There's a background on the creature. There's, they have an ecology of the creature. They have the social aspects of whatever the creature is for a majority of them. So it really digs down and provides you with a ton more information about usually the same creature, which is great. I think I think it works out well for us because there's more to write about, if you want to call that good. And then you get to third edition. Yeah. And all the books. Second edition and third edition have a lot of books.
Yeah. Well, you see, second edition, they were printing tons and tons of books because they got paid for every book they printed. Whereas third edition, well, and we could get into the second edition book printing financing. But third edition, there's just a ton of books because they were just acquired, and WotC's got to make that money back.
Yeah. Yeah. And so they just kept writing books and writing books. So there were a lot. And third edition has what, 5 monster manuals?
Yes, they have
Just
5
monster manuals.
monster manuals, and then they have a bunch of like they also have a fiend folio, which has a big section, and the best like a big bestiary section. They have Races of Faerun also has like like basically any splat book they put out comes with a bestiary because they want the game master to buy it too.
Yeah. Well, I guess if you go back to second edition too, there were what, 2 monster manuals in second edition, but then you had a compendium for every damn setting known to mankind, and there were a lot of settings.
Well, so there's the monstrous manual in second edition, but that just combined a bunch of the monstrous compendiums. The compendiums were the first things to come out, and yeah, they had over a dozen monstrous compendiums, some focused on themes, some just general monsters. And so yeah, I think there was over 4,000 something monsters for second edition. So if
looking at this hurts me. It's causing me pain just looking at it. But here's the thing: most of them stayed the same, but a lot of them, there were a fair amount of monsters where, from the compendiums to the monstrous compendium, where they bundled it, they did some tweaking to them. So we had to read both, and it's interesting because there was what Planescape had how many?
3, I believe.
That's crazy.
Yep.
That's
you got to have more monsters, Chris. If you thought of a monster and it wasn't already printed in a second edition monstrous compendium, it's because you didn't own the monstrous compendium of that monster you just thought of. They had every single monster you could ever want, and then they just kept piling on, and it just didn't make a ton of sense.
Yeah, so there's the 3 generics. Savage Coast has one. Karatur has one. These are ones I don't even like. I'm like, really? I didn't. Dark Sun, which I love, had one. Like, does anybody know what the Outer Planes were at second edition? I don't think they do.
Yeah,
but
that's the Planescape box set came out in second edition.
Yeah, and then you have like all the weird things, like you have Monstrous Arcana, Sea Devils. So you get basically an entire book on Sahagin and their friends. There's one, obviously, there's another iconic monster, the Mind Flayer.
Yeah.
So, anyways, we digress. So, third edition, a lot more writing, some fairly interesting changes. That's when you could tell the company had changed hands, because they start putting in some adding their own flavor to it, let's say. So,
well, and it definitely felt more like the monsters were designed for you to fight, and not necessarily trying to think like the best way to put this. And not like die, but like second edition, there was a trap in the Great Modron March adventure book where basically what happens is if you trigger the trap, your character dies. And so the way you defeat the trap is that you have 10-foot poles, or you have henchmen that go in front of you, or you just make a new character. And so third edition steps away from that, and instead of like churning through characters, instead it's more like, oh, these characters you're going to build from like level 1 to whatever the end of the campaign is. Maybe half the party will have to make new characters, or one person makes like 10 different characters because they keep throwing themselves into danger. And so it felt more trying to like narratively cohesive for story arcs. And I know second edition had like their stories and people were doing narrative focused style play, but like the books were definitely not written with the idea of like your characters are going to be with you throughout every single adventure. It's more like your players are going to be with you from the start of the campaign to the end of the campaign, and all the characters are very replaceable.
Sounds about right. A sidebar again. So you realize in like the earlier editions, 10-foot pole is kind of important, but it's not collapsible. There's no mention of it being collapsible. So you just carry around a 10-foot pole the entire?
Well,
that seems weird.
The other fun thing about the 10-foot pole is that it costs more than a ladder, a 10-foot ladder. And so a strat people used was you buy a ladder, you break all the
Okay.
rungs, and then you have two 10-foot poles.
In case you want to do jousting matches together. I
Well, it's
don't.
just
Yeah,
cheaper.
it was just so weird. And I could go on this tangent forever, but anyways, so yeah, so then fourth edition came out. They just said, fuck it, we're gonna get rid of a whole bunch of monsters. We're gonna add in some monsters that make no sense, and the ones that we keep, we're just gonna change everything about it. But we're not gonna give you that much information on them. And we're gonna tweak them all. So let's say if you have a kobold, now you have a kobold, but then you have a kobold warrior, a kobold shaman, and they would just add 2 or 3 different subtypes of kobolds for no reason other than I think they wanted to fill the page.
Well, no, I think the reason is pretty easy. Like they wanted all these monsters for you to be able to fight at different tiers within the game, and so like 4E was definitely a tier based kind of encounter system where you know tier 1 monsters can't threaten tier 2 characters, and so they made these monsters at various different levels to make it easier on the game master to like, oh, I want to do a big kobold game. And so now, hey, here's a bunch of kobolds all at different levels. You'll never not have a kobold throw up against your players and it be a challenging fight, or you're not going to have to homebrew a lot of kobolds. We already did that for you.
Yeah.
In one case, like, sure, that's annoying that, hey, we only have a bunch of kobolds and not that many different types of monsters, but also on the same hand, I have a bunch of different kobolds at different levels that I can use at any level of the campaign. I don't really need a ton of different monsters because I'm trying to be very focused about what my players are fighting and very thematic.
Well, I guess my problem with those monsters, as I've researched more and more, and you have also, is that there's nothing behind them, though. There's like a paragraph about you discovered these monsters lurk in the underground caves of wherever you're adventuring. And then they give you the stat block, and then they say, hey, this creature will use this ability followed up by this attack, and will run away if it's going to die. And then you have a little chart below that where it's like, if you want to know something about it, roll DC 15, DC 20, and not even all of them have that. And that's it. There's nothing else behind it, which, is great after you're in 4th edition and you're really tired of researching and writing about all the changes. But I don't know. It felt naked compared to the other ones.
Yeah, I think part of it is that 4th edition uses a point of light campaign setting where you are set in Nintir Valley Nintir Vale, and I've butchered the pronunciation on that. But basically the entire setting is like you start out this small area and then you slowly expand there and you build the lore up as you're going along. And we are not being prescriptive with monster lore. Instead, we're being descriptive. And so, depending on your style of gaming, you might not like a make up your own monster lore section.
So you know what that feels to me? It feels like, so we're starting here and we're just going to be lazy and we're not going to write a lot. It's on you. Here you go. But
they did the hard part. They did the mechanics.
Yeah, and that took up all their time because the mechanics were interesting. They're not bad. They're just rarely detailed. So I can see, I guess, why they have to spend all their time on the mechanics versus anything else. 5th edition rolls around. 5th edition's weird. There's very little change to monsters from 2nd and 3rd editions. And it's like they basically looked at 4th edition and were like, we're just going to pretend that never existed. So there's way more information than 4th edition on the monsters, but it still feels you leave unfulfilled after you read about them because there's not much to them, but at least they give you something and at least they go back to what the monster was.
Yeah, that my favorite descriptions of monsters typically comes from like 2nd edition. I think 2nd edition really has interesting monster lore. Not all of it hits great. Like the Hadazi does not.
Yeah, you might have
Fifth
wanted.
edition's wasn't great. The second edition was worse because it was more blatant about the like racist kind of undertones of the monster. But typically, second edition has much more interesting lore, and also like part of it's probably because like they're just making stuff up. Like they don't have like a history that they have to focus on. Whereas fifth edition's like, well, people really know this monster for this one thing, so that's what we're going to focus
Mhm.
on. We're not going to be innovative with it because fifth edition was trying to claw back second edition, third edition grognards and not be as different as fourth edition was.
Which is interesting because I had never really. I stopped at second edition, but doing the research that we've done throughout the years, I was like, oh, they really kind of harken back to second edition for a lot of this information, and it was interesting to when we first started up. Now it's not interesting; it just is tiring to look at it and be like, oh, okay, they really try and get back to some of the core, parts of these creatures, but at the same time, they have to tweak it a little bit because kinder, gentler game. And as you said before, it's like the purpose isn't to kill you. The purpose is to go and have a good time and hang out with your friends and play a character for as long as you want throughout that campaign. So, and that's how the game's progressed. So it's good. So they did that, but I'd never realized that until we started doing these, which is I learned something. Now I need to stop because my brain is full. So
I tried explaining to my teacher once that I had learned more than my brain could handle. And they, for some strange reason, didn't let me stop school.
yeah, well, teachers do that.
Yeah.
So now we've just talked about looking from the core books that when we first started off, we're like, oh, I'll go through and I'll look at the monster manuals. And hey, there's a fiend folio. I'm going to look at that. But we started being like, well, it's a deep dive, and the name kind of dictates that we really look at every source, and that's a mistake on some of these creatures.
Really, we should have called it Shadow Dive.
Yeah,
It
so
would have been a lot easier.
yeah, really would have. Or there's a lot of great deep dives out there. I've seen a lot of good videos from people, and there's some good, articles written. But when they say deep dive, they mean, hey, we're going to look at it the fifth edition and drill down the fifth edition. And I'm like, yeah, we should have done that too.
Yeah.
So the
You
next
can't
big
write
source-
60,000 words about the beholders if you're just looking at fifth edition beholders. There's not even 60,000 words that WotC's written on beholders for fifth edition.
There's over 20 different types of beholders throughout the edition.
That's good.
Insane. But so I think for me, the next big source that I realized we needed to tap into was Dragon Magazine, because I loved Dragon Magazine when I was a kid. And they had the Ecology of series. Thanks, Ed Greenwood. I love you, but I didn't want to discover those because you really wrote a lot of stuff in some of those articles. And they were fun. They were usually a story. So you'd read the story, and then after the story was over, you'd go through basically his footnotes, and it would give you all the stats, half of which never matched up with what were in the monster manual.
Well, the ecology of articles are interesting because you have story time first, and then it dives into mechanics, and it really seems like Ed Greenwood, because he was like the original writer for all these before like other people are like, oh, I could also do this, and it'll be really interesting. And so, like at the end of it, he'd be like, here's a bunch of variant rules for these monsters you can choose to use, I guess, if you want. Sometimes he'll even be like, if you do this, make sure you give your players more experience points because the monster's harder.
Yeah. It was sort of like you know what? People are going to mess with my crap. Okay, screw you. I'm going to make my monsters harder now. And you have to read about this. I mean, that's, I like reading them. They're a good resource when we have a monster that has one of those. It's kind of fun. Now, they get boring. They carried that series through a long time. And when Greenwood stopped writing them, they kind of were you'd find them intermittently. They honestly, they weren't as good. So that was the first one. Then it started going, I don't want to say downhill, but it started going really, we fell down the rabbit hole. We didn't crawl down the rabbit hole. We just fell down it because there was Dungeon Magazine, which had a lot of, and we didn't, I guess it's important to know, we didn't just be like, oh, so hey, we found some new information from like a mechanic standpoint or stat block standpoint. It was like, hey, this monster is heavily featured in this adventure in Dungeon Magazine, and here's where it is, here's what it's doing, and it's important in the campaign. I'm like, why did I do this to myself? I blame Steven. So Dungeon Magazine was one. In going with that, like first edition modules would have a lot in there, and not really from a change, but the module would be like, hey, we're going to feature the Sahagin, or this one is all about X. So we'd write about how this was the feature and how it played into the adventure. And then it was, holy smokes, there have been some really strange things that we have put through. We want to make sure it's complete, so we scour everything. What's been, let's see. Original White Dwarf magazines. Good luck trying to find edition 2 of White, issue number 2.
Dwarf magazine started before the Dragon magazine, and Dragon magazine was originally known as the Dragon, and so it was like, I think the Dragon came out maybe 13 editions into White Dwarf, and then maybe 20 or 30 Dragon magazines came out, and then Dungeon started coming out for adventures, where Dragon was more focused on content like mechanics and monsters and things of that nature. Dungeon was focused specifically towards adventurers.
And White Dwarf had, that's where you found the Fiend Folio. A lot of those monsters that from the Fiend Folio were pulled from their section called Fiend Folio. And
White Dwarf was focused on way more than just Dungeons and Dragons. It was kind of like all nerd culture.
Yeah, and boy, you want to find some weird monsters that never should have existed that you would only find there. Read White Dwarf magazine. It's like, ooh. And then you look at the art and you're like, oh god, these people did some really bad acid. It's bad.
Yeah, I think the Ankh is one of those monsters that originated in White Dwarf, and
they were just laying there, probably on the ground, screaming, like on a really bad trip. Like someone's like, we're gonna just lock Bob in a room for 12 hours. We'll come back later. He'll be okay.
Yeah. A little picnic ant came in, terrorizing him. It was good.
Some of the other ones that I just boggled the imagination were, and I didn't know existed. Let's see, I've got a list here. 4th edition had Dark Sun. They had their own creature catalog.
All the settings had I think Ebron had their own creature catalog.
Yeah, but I didn't realize Dark Sun made it to 4th edition. I thought it died out.
As far as I know, the hardcore Dark Sun people do not like 4th edition's version. And they're like, you just ignore it.
Let's see. And I found there's been some interesting books that I've discovered. 3rd edition, City of Sharn is probably one of the most interesting books that I've read. And I actually bought the hard copy of it because I like the book a lot. I think it's a really good book. I think you can pull a lot from it. I think it has a lot of potential for campaigns. But there's some stuff in there that I'm just like, God damn it, why did I read this book? There's more monsters in here.
So what you're saying is this old 3rd edition Ebron book gets the official Dumpstat seal of approval.
Well, yes, from me at least. I don't know what your feelings are on it.
I haven't read it that closely to have an opinion. Spelljammer from 2nd edition gets my seal of approval.
Right. The other two things, let's see. I have no one. Have you? I think we're the only 3 people, myself, my other personality, and you, that have heard of the 2nd edition Greyhawk adventure called Flames of the Falcon. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I mean, and that kind of gets into like what second edition was doing, which was if we print books, we get money. We don't care if they actually sell. And so, yeah, unfortunately. And then also, like, on top of that, like, they made tons of settings, which was
Yeah.
fractional, like, fracturing their player base. And so, like, if they made, if you have 1,000 different settings and you make 1,000 different adventures, like, they're just not going to sell because people aren't going to buy books or adventures for their setting of choice.
The last one that I didn't really play fourth edition that I have on my list goes like, yeah, fourth edition had an adventure called King of the Troll Haunt Warrens. Sure, fourth edition didn't have a lot of adventures out there that I've found when we've been doing this, and that was one I was like, okay, that had something in it that we did, probably trolls. So
We
yeah,
have done trolls.
there's been some bizarre stuff that we've looked into, and you know what? It's great. I bitch about it as I'm going through. I'm usually, texting you being like, I hate this, I hate you. Why are we doing this to ourselves? And then I get done and I'm like, I might have learned something. But again, brain's full. So yeah.
There's definitely at a point where we're like, have we already done trolls? And we're like,
I know.
I guess we could look. We could double check.
Have to go through the list and be like, oh, we did that monster already.
Yeah.
But we've been focused on monsters for a while, but we haven't done just monsters.
No, we've done some classes, and you tell me every time we do a class, we're not allowed to look at another class until you forget, like 6-8 months later, and then we sneak in another class.
No, you sneak in another class.
Soon we'll get to do sorcerer or rogue.
Well, we did rogue.
Oh, that's right. We did. See?
That's the one that broke me. Rogue broke me. The first one we did was Barth the Barbarian.
Barbarian.
Wasn't horrible. It was Wizard. Ooh.
Oh yeah, we did do Wizard.
That was I think the one where I was like, never again. And I think later on you're like, come on, we'll do Cleric. How hard can that be? I'm like, just as hard as the Wizard. They get just as many spells. They just have to pray to their god to get them. God, I hate you.
But Cleric is really interesting because in second edition, I got to learn about quest spells, which were like these like super powerful spells, like even more powerful than 9th level spells. But like clerics had to go on a quest for their deity, and maybe they got to cast it once or twice if they were lucky in their lifetime. And so, like there's some really interesting things when you look, into the past.
Didn't we do an entire deep dive on quest spells after that?
We did do a deep dive. I think we called it a rewind for quest spells. Yeah. So, there's a lot of interesting things, Chris.
Yeah, the other one that I think that wasn't bad, it just made me kind of sad, was the Ranger. You're just like, boy, they really want the Ranger to be like a cool, neat character, like we're going to steal this directly from Lord of the Rings and make them awesome. And the Ranger really has suffered through the additions with, we're not quite sure where we want to go with this character class, so we're just going to throw things at it. And then, no, that doesn't work.
I had completely forgotten we'd done the Ranger. I was like, have we done the Ranger?
Oh, we've done the Ranger.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. So I feel bad.
I remember, because it has my favorite piece of art on it, which is a woman riding on top of like a dire boar, and she has like this huge lance, and it's like she's about to go to like a jousting tournament, but her horse just happens to be a boar that's going to eat everyone.
Well, what edition is it in? And because that would make a difference on how much clothing she would be wearing, which is horrible.
Yeah, she's mostly wearing normal clothes.
Good.
But it's from the Complete Ranger's Handbook, 1993, and it's just a very silly looking thing.
Yeah, I think they had started moving away from the blatantly sexist bullshit that they had in the first few editions, so that's good.
Yeah, I don't think that the fan service ever ended, but yeah. So okay, yeah, I forgot we had done the Ranger. I was like, I thought the next one was like Rogue or Warlock.
No, I did Rogue, which hurt me physically and mentally, and the last one we did, I think, was Artificer, which wasn't bad, but was another one of those like, hey, we need to make a new class. We're going to make the Artificer. And I want to say I don't reread them most of the time. I'm going to put this aside and never think about it again. But I feel like the Artificer was started in a Dragon magazine, if I remember correctly, and kind of developed from there. I don't know. You're looking it up, which is good. That's why you're around.
Oh, we have done the Artificer. Wow, I forgot we did the Artificer.
Do you not think I didn't do any research on this before we started talking about it? There's no.
That was so long ago. That was so long ago. I can't remember anything. But yeah, well, it started in 2nd edition, and it was the Wizard School of Artifice. And so you had to be a wizard, and then you got to be an artificer. And instead of magic, you use gadgets.
I am no longer doing show notes for you, since you obviously don't look at them.
So, I forget how many. There's 126.
That's why I write them down for you.
I can't believe you. What happens if you lie to me?
When have I ever lied to you? Don't answer that.
Exactly.
So we did the one that we've also done races, but it was interesting because I started looking at that. We haven't done the only 2 races that I've looked at that have just been pure race. It's just like a pure player character race have been the Goliath and the Dragonborn, which I thought was interesting because we've done a lot of other ones, like things that you've everything.
Well, the Warforged is kind of player focused.
Yeah, but in I forget which edition they're listed first and foremost as a creature that you can fight.
Okay.
And so a lot of these ones that we've done, the Kenku, for existence, we do the player character portion of it in conjunction with the creature that's trying to kill you that you find in the monster manual. Those 2, the Goliath and the Dragonborn, are the only ones that have had that, for the most part, not 100%, that or player characters.
They started out as player characters, not necessarily in the monster manual first.
Right.
Okay, I get what you mean. Yeah. I mean, because the Genasi started out as a monster, but then in one of the books, one of the last books for that edition, the Handbook of the Interplanes. The Interplanes one, you got to play as they had rules for how you could build a Genasi, as well as like an astral elf and a couple of other creatures. And so, I think that means, Chris, we have to do a deep dive on the dwarf.
Oh, I knew you were going to say that. I was waiting for you, the dwarf or elf.
What about the gnome? Everyone loves gnomes.
Yeah. No. Can we just say for elves, we did the drow and call it a day? They're the best elves anyways.
No. I mean, we did the frost giant. We still need to do fire giants now.
Oh, God. So let's see. And then we're just going to put that aside for now. We've done other ones. Let's see. Artifacts were great. And then we did history ofs, which were probably some of the cooler ones. We haven't done those in a while because, man, there's a lot of stuff on some of these, especially when you pick Big B and Vecna as the 2 you want to do histories of.
Well, it's either there's a lot of information on them or there's nothing. Because, Vecna even has books, like fantasy novels that include information about them. And then you look at things like Melf. And you're like, oh, here's one sentence about Melf, and then here's a bunch of spells with his name on it. It's like, can I maybe get a paragraph of information? I think Tinzer had that problem where it's like he was mentioned in a sentence as he died in this year fighting off a dozen red wizards at once. And that was
sort of hey, he was what was the thing with Big B? It's the something of 7, the group of 7. I forget what it was.
Circle of 7?
And there's 7 of them, and we talk about 2 of them a lot, and the rest, who cares?
Yeah. Well, and part of the problem, I guess, with that comes from the Circle of 7, Big B. I can't think of the big one that everyone would know, Mordekainen, and all the other ones whose names I'm sure exist somewhere. These were all players in Gygax's home game. And Mordekainen was his character that he would play when someone else was GMing, or maybe he was a big proponent of the DMPC. Who knows? But yeah, like it is interesting that like Big B made it. I guess that guy, whoever played Big B, was close fans of Gygax, because the other ones are like almost nothing written about them.
Which one was his son's character? Something spelled backwards, right?
There's Paul Gygax. He was going to play a male elf character, but he didn't know what an elf name would be, and so he combined male and elf to make Melf, which is why we have such wonderful spells like Melf's Acid Arrow, and you're like, oh, what's a Melf? And no, that's a male elf's character's name. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Real creative.
Oh, so yeah, Vecna was one that, Vecna was the one that it was just sort of like, okay, I'm never doing Strahd. Never gonna actually bring up Strahd to do, because, boy, there was a lot on Vecna.
Well, and we did kind of touch on Strahd when we did our vampire deep dive, because like during October we tried to do like classic monsters. We kind of run out of classic monsters, unless we want to do like skeleton.
Well, we've done classic monsters that fit the theme for Halloween.
Yeah, skeleton. I think that's what we're doing this October.
Yeah, it does get a little. Those are dark. Some of those are dark monsters that we've gotten into. You know, it was like, oh, we'll do ghoul. And then, now we're kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel, and we're like, whoa, we're going to do the pentaligogram, which is that female head with entrails pouring out of it that basically bites your neck and takes over your body by putting its head on you.
That we did that one. Japanese folklore. But yeah, I mean, well, and part of the pun, but I think the skeleton's going to be a little bone dry when it comes to how interesting it is.
Anyways, moving on. And then when we're really tired, we did one-shot wonders, because we're like, I don't want to do it. So it was, but of course, to make it difficult on ourselves, we did how many? 5 monsters, one for each edition that only appeared in that edition.
Yep. And I think I even cheated on one of them, because they kind of existed in like 2 editions, but I was like, it doesn't count.
Yeah,
I don't remember which one that was, though.
Made me sad that we didn't. I'm actually going to look that up. You type faster than me. You look at it. So there were, these poor guys didn't have a chance. So, all right, let's move on to what was your favorite deep dive?
My favorite deep dive? Oh, Chris, do I start with the kobold, or do I talk about how great the kobold is? Actually, I think my favorite deep dive probably is maybe the Aboleth, because I just really find the 2nd edition idea of the Aboleth, where like they're scientists and they abhor all magic, to be like a really neat change to a monster, until they just became like weird psionic fish creatures. And then 5th edition was like, they are reborn in the plane of water. And it's like, why? That's just what they do.
Yeah, you kept putting that on the poll for a long time till it got to be done.
Yes. I think we only did it because you couldn't do like you were on vacation or something, and weren't done with the deep dive. So I was like, I'll just do the Aboleth. It'll be fun.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. That, or maybe, I mean, not to be boring, but like the Beholder is a fun monster, just because they're kind of like these very weird creatures, even just like in a single edition, but like all these editions keep making like these weird changes to them. Like 5th edition, Beholders attack each other on sight. In 2nd edition, they're flying around in spelljammers, and like they have to work together. In 1st edition, maybe they're like these weird kind of eccentric crazy people, but they don't work with other Beholders, but they also don't fight them to the death. And my favorite Beholder is like a Cavalier Beholder that like sits on top of like this weird centipede creature and just like charges into battle on a centipede.
Yeah, 2nd edition, I remember it was just like, I'm like, oh, thank God I'm done. And I was like, wait, what's a Beholder kin? Are you fucking kidding me? There were like 8 more. I'm like, no. And then 1st edition, 1st edition being 1st edition, it was like, and if it uses its eye stalk, to fire off a death ray at you, roll on a ridiculously hard save, or be dead. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. You're just dead. It's like,
I'd teach
that
you.
doesn't seem fair. So
It is fair.
well,
It can. It's a random IRA. It might not come up. That makes it fair.
sure. Because you're supposed to roll on which one it would use, and DMs in first edition would never be like, I'm sick of this shit. I'm using death ray.
Yeah. I definitely have never rolled a die to randomly determine the IRA and then picked which one I wanted. Definitely have never done that.
Was there a deep was there a deep dive that you can think off the top of your head that was one that you're like, I'm never doing this again? I hate the deep dives. We're stopping right now.
Not off the top of my head. There's been a couple where I'm like, this is so boring. Why are we talking about this? Probably like werewolves. Like I just can't. I don't think I've ever been a fan of like therianthropes, lycanthropes, whatever you want to call them. Werewolves are just meh, whatever.
And then
do you have a favorite, Chris? What's been your favorite? The GIF? Oh,
I like the GIF.
Yeah. The hippos with the firearms.
Good. Yeah, hippos that blow stuff up. It's fantastic. That and the ones on artifacts. I liked artifacts. I liked looking and being like, hey, there was a lot of information on the machine of Mad the Lum, or Lum the Mad. I like that. That was fascinating. So
you see, those ones I just don't care about at all.
I like those. I like magic items. I'm a player mainly nowadays. So, all right. And then I was going to ask you which one you want to see in the future. We know what the answer is. Red Dragon.
We got to do Red Dragon eventually. Hey, Chris, it's the year of the dragon.
Great. We'll do it next. Fantastic. Not February. February's a short month. This could be a long one. So
what's the longest month in the year? It's June, July. Those months just blur together. So it's
we'll just call that 1 month.
Yeah.
So we also, we've expanded out the deep dives. We do videos now. And it's been interesting. The most popular video, which is not even close to our most popular article, is the Shadow Kai. For some reason, I don't know why, but it's definitely the most popular video, which is great. People seem to gotten a lot of we've gotten a lot of love for that one. The most popular article that we've written is on the Lich, if I remember correctly. That actually won Best Post of the Year for 2002 on
2020.
Behind the Screen.
We haven't been doing this since 2002.
You know what I meant. I just inversed the numbers. So that was a popular one.
Mm-hmm.
So we've done a lot. Moving forward, we'll just keep doing them, I guess. We do the way we do it now is our patrons get to vote. We set a poll out on monsters we think are interesting. They vote on the poll, and that's 95% of the time what we do. We also do quarterly stickers for the monsters. Hi, honey. That was just bizarre. So yeah, deep dives have been fun. I think they've been a nice point of difference for us. I think that we really delve into more information than a lot of the other deep dives that are out there. Not that they're bad. We just decide to take it to a whole new level because I think in some ways we're broken. Or at least now we're broken because we've done this. So cool. I've enjoyed the deep dives.
Really? Because I'm pretty sure if I were to ask you which deep dive have you done that you just want to stop doing all deep dives, you would say every single one of them.
We're on camera now. I'm not going to say that.
Okay.
I deny that. So anyways, before we go, Stephen, because our hour is almost up, do you have a rant this week?
I don't really have a rant, Chris. I don't know why you think I rant about things.
Do you have something you'd like to speak about that comes from your heart?
Well, I already wrote about this on our blog, Jumping. Jumping is an interesting situation that we have in D&D 5e because it is such a weird, hot point for so many people. One of the little show crawls that we have this week is talking about how an elephant can high jump 9 feet because you high jump a number of feet equal to 3 plus your strength modifier. So elephants have a high jump of 9 feet because they have a +6 strength modifier. Cats have a -4 strength modifier, so they get to high jump -1 feet. And so
How's that work?
jumping just can't ever seem to figure out how it's supposed to work in fifth edition of Dungeons and Dragons. And that's not even getting into things like the jump spell, where it triples your jump distance, but it doesn't explain how that works in turn order, because you can only long jump up to your movement on your turn. But if you can long jump 90 feet, your movement is only 30 feet or maybe 60 feet if your GM allows you to dash while you're jumping. Or I guess if you're a rogue, maybe 90 feet if all you do on your turn is move, dash with your action, dash with your bonus action. And so like it's very weird how jumping works in fifth edition. And then you get like Boots of Springing, which says it limits it to your movement. But what happens if you combined the jump spell and Boots of Striding and Springing together? Are you like now able to jump 270 feet, or are you restrained to your movement? Jumping is just like one of those things no one ever thinks about. And then you start working on the game, like you write all these mechanics, and then you play, and you're like, wait, what am I supposed to do when I jump? How far can I jump? And it's just one of those things that that I really feel like the designers of fifth edition just kind of struggled with, which was, what even is jumping? Like, what is this mundane activity adventurers are supposed to do? And they just really just kind of flipped it in this edition. And it's kind of amazing how broken and how nonsensical jumping is in this edition.
Okay, I never really thought about it, but yeah, so jump 90 feet is 30 yards. So I'm picturing on a football field. Holy crap. And then I start thinking about how far could I, from a standing position, jump?
Well, if you jump from
Not
standing
far.
position, it's only half. So technically only be
Still,
45 feet or 15 yards.
I'd be happy
And
to
in
get
meters,
5 feet.
that's, who knows in meters? It's not a real measurement system.
Even with a running, well, see, the problem is if I did a running jump, then there's a high probability to hurt myself. So I'd probably just do it from a standing position. And then I could
Well,
still hurt
to be
myself.
fair, Chris, you're only jumping 90 feet if you have like a strength score of 30. So actually it'd be like 60 feet. So that's only 20 yards. And
So
that's
yeah, I
if you have a
forgot.
strength score of 20.
So if I'm working on like my personal strength score, then I'm like a cat. Great.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
can jump a -1 foot. Fantastic.
High
That sounds
jump,
right.
-1 feet.
No, that sounds about
Otherwise,
right.
they can long jump 2 feet, I think.
Yeah, no, so I'm a cat. Perfect.
Yeah.
Cat
I wouldn't
indeed.
even say that. I would say you're probably more like 6 inches for your long jump.
Great. I'm gonna have to look at
Yeah.
something with a really low strength modifier, like really low. So, all right, cool. So yeah, that article is on Dumpstat right now on the Dumpstat Adventures website.
Yeah. Read all about how jumping is dumb and just ignore it and don't be a pedantic asshole about it.
Yeah, good point. So, all right, well, it looks like our hour's up, Stephen. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
No, have a good week. Roll
You don't want to
lots
say
of
goodbye to
natural
me?
20s in all of your life. Bye, Chris.
We won't be live streaming the next 2 weeks.
No.
Both have family commitments next week, and then after the following week, we're both going to a wedding of one of our friends, the person we've been playing with 6 years, and he's getting married on a cruise, which is freaking awesome. So we will return after that. Everybody have a wonderful Sunday. Bye.